Hey, you guys, what's going on? It's another movie retrospective, and we're talking about more Universal monsters. 'Cause you guys are like so excited about these.
Going back to the classics. This one got voted on, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay,
Yeah. And I had actually been wanting to do this one for a long time because I haven't seen weirdly because the sequel to this, which is what was it called, Revenge of the Creature, that was on Mystery Science Theater. So I've actually seen the sequel to this like more than I've seen the actual one. So I was excited to go back and watch the actual first one. It's not bad. I mean, It's not as good as the first one.
Okay.
And there's a third one too, which I had forgotten about it, and like the third one I haven't seen, but it looks kind of terrible from like clips of it.
This one is good for the time. Not only a couple things have aged well in it, if you ask me, but I can see why it's classic.
I mean, I kind of feel like the thing about this one, I love this movie, honestly. The best thing about it is the monster and like the suit, you know what I mean? Like that still looks great, I feel like.
The underwater action shots.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where this movie really shines, more than anything. The thing about it is I kind of feel like by this point, because Creature from the Black Lagoon came out in 1954, which is considerably later than a lot of like Universal monsters' heyday, you know what I mean? This was like the first new monster they'd introduced. The thing about it was that all the old school monsters, like Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman and the Mummy and all that kind of stuff, nobody was going to see, like throughout the 1940s and stuff, nobody was really going to see those monsters, at least in like a serious horror movie context. Like it seemed like the only movies that were coming out that were doing any business at that time were ones that were like funny, like Abbott and Costello meet whoever. So
they were riffing on the classics.
Right, and that's what I mean. So like when the 50s came along, obviously anybody that knows anything about film history in the United States, it's like obviously the 50s was all about monster movies and sci-fi. So this was Universal's attempt to do something more along those lines. So they did actually like introduce a new monster, which quickly kind of became as iconic as the old ones had. But, I mean, the thing about this, like, the guy that had the idea for it, I guess he had the idea for it, like, way back in the early 1940s. He was talking to, I think it was somebody that was working on Citizen Kane, and he was talking to, like, this cinematographer, and the cinematographer was from Mexico, and he said, he was talking something about, like, some story in the Amazon about, like, a half-man, half-fish person, or something like that. So there was, like, some kind of urban legend or some kind of, like, mythology about it. And the guy was like, ooh, that's like kind of a cool idea. So like many years later when he got approached by Universal and they were asking him, hey, can you come up with like a monster movie sci-fi kind of mashup thing? He remembered that and he wrote a story that I think was initially called The Sea Monster. And then it went through a couple different iterations of that. And they finally filmed it as like Creature from the Black Lagoon. So, the story of this one is like pretty simple. It's like pretty straightforward. You got kind of like at the very beginning, you have like an archaeologist type dude. And he finds this sort of like fossilized claw of what looks like a half fish, half man, pretty much. Yeah. And, thinking that it was like some extinct animal that is not around anymore, he's like, woohoo, we need to go like find the rest of this fossil. So we need to go down to the Amazon. So him and like a bunch of kind of interchangeable white dudes that kind of all look the same. Everybody looked the same in these movies. Yeah. I was like watching, if you guys don't know about, what's that channel called? It's like Count Wolfula or whatever. Like that dude's like super funny. And he did a breakdown of this too. And he said the two main guys in it, he couldn't tell them apart. So he's like the whole love triangle thing, like with them and Julia Adams, like the hot chick in the white swimsuit. Like he was just kind of like, so I was like weirded out by this whole thing because I couldn't tell one from the other.
Yeah, well, it's shot in black and white. They're all basically wearing the same style of clothing. They have the same voice.
Yeah, a lot of them did.
And the acting styles were the same that they taught these guys, and they are all speaking basically kind of like transatlantic, or it's stage acting. So they all end up being the same guy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they do kind of look a little bit different. I think,
the only guy that isn't the same guy is the Mexican guy. the guy captaining in the boat.
But Esther Paiva, who was also in the sequel. He's great, actually.
But if you go look in a lot of these 50s movies, even like The Thing from Another World or the original Thing, the dudes are all kind of like carbon copies of each other, and I think it has to do with the fact that it's shot in black and white. They're wearing similar clothes, and they're all using kind of that same announcer's voice. So
yeah, they definitely
they're
had
all
a
kind of
type.
the same, yeah.
Like 50s white dudes in movies, always they had a type.
There's a type
that they always put in there, like the authoritative white dudes that were in there.
They were official white dudes.
Like official white dudes.
Official white dudes. There's only like 3 or 4 different models, but they all looked alike. Too. They all wore the same clothes. A lot of times. So
they didn't
have a lot of individual personality,
right.
on-screen personality. It like the leading man is always the same fucking dude.
I mean,
basically.
It might as well be.
Might as well.
It might as well
be the same dude. They just really hadn't really perfected the craft of movie making yet to make something with a bunch of interesting, compelling characters.
Yeah.
There are a few exceptions when it comes to sci-fi horror. War of the Worlds. Okay, pretty much but that was not black and white, but every character in that was distinct.
Yeah.
And then them with the ants.
Yeah.
Pretty distinct. You can see how them and the creature from the Black Lagoon influenced Alien and Aliens a lot.
Yeah, big time.
I think Cameron was making classic monster movies, but then just updating them. When he did Aliens, and then Ridley Scott is trying to perfect 50s monster movies in space too. He's trying to make it realistic, with real people in it, not archetypes, stage archetypes.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I kind of feel like a lot of 50s sci-fi movies, they weren't so much characters as archetypes.
They're archetypes, yeah.
Right,
and Ridley Scott blew it out of the water with Alien 1. All of a sudden, it's real people, real working people in space, like truckers or they're like merchant marines on the ocean. But it's men and women and different socioeconomic classes. You have the enlisted and the officers, and there's tensions kind of between them and corporate culture. But they're not acting. They're just kind of... A lot of that shit was ad-libbed, and they were just being regular people in there, which is very different from a classic
like I said, I think
movie.
that was kind of more of like a 60s development, 60s and onward, with kind of more of a cinema verite, or like a more... naturalistic filmmaking style.
Yeah.
Whereas prior to that, I feel like it was much more still holdover from stagey. This is obviously not reality, so it's a lot more
it's real theoretical, almost kind of like
fictional.
Not theoretical, but fictionalized and archetypical and stylized.
Right.
And and that goes into original Star Trek series was like that. It was a mixture. It was cool. You could relate to the people, but it was still very stylized. The acting. I remember being a kid, my dad took me to see the very first Alien, and I had never really seen a movie like that. I was young. I hadn't seen many movies, but on television there weren't any movies like that. It was like watching reality TV, because their acting styles were not stylized. It was like you were watching something really happening, and that really drew the audience into it. You could relate to these characters because they were like you, type of deal, or they were like people you knew when you were a kid. You're like, this is really happening. These movies are a good example of stylized theater being shot on film. It's very stagey, old-fashioned stagey, which it's going to give a certain kind of tone, and it tends to be kind of bleak in a way. Not bleak. What's a good? Not a lot of emotion to it. You don't really relate to these people, and I don't really think the audiences of the time related to the people. I think they related more to the monsters.
Well, and the thing about this one too, because what I was going to say when you were talking about this movie being a big influence on James Cameron or later monster movies, was that ironically, well, I don't know if it's ironically, but Creature from the Black Lagoon, they basically based it on Beauty and the Beast or King Kong, or kind of like a template like that, because in this one, even though it's not explicitly spelled out in the movie, the humans are the bad guys.
Yeah.
Really, I mean,
They didn't ask.
they're not like portrayed that way. Yeah, like the creature was just minding his own beeswax in his little black lagoon. Had that scientist not found that fossil and said, "Hey, we're gonna go down this lagoon or like find the rest of this fossil," and then they found the living one, and then they got all head up because they're like, "Oh my god, we got to capture this because nobody will believe us, and we're gonna take it back." And then they start like poisoning the fucking water, like blowing shit up and everything like that. And he's just like, "Dude, I'm just like swimming here. Is that okay with you?" Or like I said, so it wasn't like real explicit. But the more you watch the movie, you're like, yeah, the people are the bad guys.
Yeah, there was one guy in there that tried to stop it at the end. He's like, no, stop shooting him. They were going to shoot him in the back while he was running.
Yeah, they're like, dude.
No, let him go. You know?
Yeah, because that one blonde guy was like was a fucknut. The one slightly different looking guy.
And in typical 1950s, actually it went all the way back to the 30s too. The monster is for some reason attracted to the woman. And when you look at the difference between the damn fish man and the woman, he would think that she was disgusting. You know what I mean? That fish man wouldn't think that girl
I don't know,
cute.
man. Because I mean, Guillermo
she was
del
cute,
Toro.
but she wasn't that cute.
Guillermo del Toro, I mean, most of you guys know, but like, he had been wanting to make Creature from the Black Lagoon for a really long time, like do a remake of it, and he loved that movie so much, and then like it kept falling through because dark universe and all that kind of stuff, and then he just didn't do it, and he said, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna make my own story that's sort of like that." So he made The Shape of Water, and won an Oscar. But that's essentially what it would have been like if the fish man got captured and then like a human woman fell in love with him and he fell in love with her. So they actually like have a relationship, like the fish man and the woman. So, so that's what would have happened. But it was his own take on Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's actually very good if you haven't seen it. It's not a horror movie exactly, but it has like horror elements to it, but it's really good. I did a review of it a little while back. It came out, 2018, 2019, something like that. But yeah. So, an interesting thing too about like one of the guy that played like the darker haired, generic white man.
Yeah.
That guy, Richard Carlson, he was in a ton of stuff. He was also a writer, like a screenwriter, and I've been doing, that Boris Karloff thriller series, and he wrote some episodes of that, and he was like in it as well, because I was like, when I cross-referenced, I was like, oh my god, that was the guy from Creature from the Black Lagoon. So it's like, you always kind of see like the same people turning up like that. And like I said, Julia Adams was like super, super hot in this. But, and Whit Bissell was in it too, and he was in a bunch of those 50s. I think he was in I Was a Teenage Werewolf? Was he in I Was a Teenage Werewolf? Yeah, he was he was in one of those. But he was in all that kind of, he always played like the same kind of part. But yeah, so basically, they just go down to the Amazon, they find this creature. The blonde guy is basically like, we need to capture this creature and like get him. So the rest of the movie is them trying to capture the creature falling in love with the human woman, and essentially then like after the creature tries to keep them from leaving the lagoon, because so he's smart, like he seems to have like kind of human intelligence, because once he figures out that that they want to go back and like bring more people there, like, and they're gonna fuck it up even worse, like he's like, well, you guys can't leave, so he just like tries to like block them into the lagoon. Like they do get out, but he does try to like prevent them from leaving, which I was like, oh, okay, so he's not that dumb. But yeah, so the thing about it is that, I mean, I still think I love the monster design, okay, on this. And we were talking about it because I had forgotten like how this was made, but they were talking about when they first made the costume, they were gonna try and put, like an oxygen tank or some kind of thing where like the dude could breathe. Mm. They figured out they couldn't do it because it would look stupid. Right. So they didn't. Okay. So the guy, it's two different guys. Okay. On land, he's played by a guy named Ben Chapman, and underwater, probably more famously, he's played by stuntman Rico Browning, and who is actually still alive, and he does horror cons. I've seen him at a couple horror cons, so he's still out there, like, doing the Gill-man thing, which is like really, really cool. But yeah, he would just hold his breath. Now they said that sometimes he would hold his breath for 4 minutes, which He's like, well, you could technically maybe hold your breath for 4 minutes, like if you weren't doing anything, like if you were just sitting there, because there were some shots of that.
Not using up your
But he's like, if you're swimming around and stuff, maybe 2 minutes tops. Yeah. That's about all he could do. So anytime you see the Gill-man swimming around underwater, he doesn't have a tank, he doesn't have nothing. That's just like a dude in a suit swimming around.
Yeah, I didn't see any bubbles, so I was.
And especially like toward because we were like talking about like toward the end with those underwater fight scenes, like with him fighting the dudes under. I'm like, holy crap, that's amazing. If that dude is just like fucking holding his breath like that.
That's what shines in this movie is the underwater
big
action.
Big time.
It looks like something. Okay, a lot of times in the 50s movies, it's just kind of real static bullshit,
like
action.
Lumbering monster suits.
This looks fast.
Yeah,
the edit's really good. It looks dangerous. It looks like they really are fighting. Then you got scuba divers. They're going pretty fast, and they're got spear guns and shit trying to fight him. And they're going underneath stuff. It's good. The edit is very good. It's a very well edited and acted out action scenes.
Yeah.
The only scenes I've ever seen like this in the 50s would be like them when the army was fighting the ants in the flood control systems underneath L.A. And also when that scene, I think it was under L.A. Some of those dudes really knew how to handle weapons, and guys in close combat with Thompson submachine guns against giant ants, you could buy it. And that's really kind of where they went with aliens, with the colonial space marines fighting the things. This also kind of brings in aliens or alien. The costume looks really good, and as far as I know, that costume probably was not topped until Alien. I can't think of any other monster that looked real credible like that. A full-body monster. It looks
like a real creature. It looks like a real animal.
Pretty real. Real.
I mean, like especially as far as like the standards 50s, of the 50s
for the
went.
50s of the time, it's pretty real.
Which most of the monsters in the 50s looked pretty janky.
Right. And I'm trying to think of any other movie after that had a realistic full-body suit monster. Alien. Probably the next one.
Yeah, it's like really hard to think of one. I mean, I'm sure there is one that we're forgetting, but I mean that fucking Gill-man suit is so good. It looks so good.
Well, I'm not talking about a zombie or anything like that. I'm talking about a full body dude in a monster suit.
Like a monster suit.
Monster suit. And I can't think of anything after this right up until Alien 1. Alien.
Yeah, so that's more than 20 years.
Yeah, because I remember being a kid in the 70s, mid-70s, and the only monster suit that impressed me up until that time was the creature from the Black Lagoon. There wasn't anything else. And then Alien came out. It was 79. And I was just like, whoa! It just totally changed the paradigm.
I mean...
think about it, man. The apes from Planet of the Apes didn't look real.
No. They looked good. I'm not saying they didn't look good, but they didn't look like that. I didn't really think that was a real ape person.
No, you knew it was a dude.
You knew that was a dude in a mask.
This thing, you know what I mean? It's a guy in basically a souped up wetsuit. But you can buy it. Especially in the 50s context.
The thing about it, I'm usually a big advocate of don't show your monster that much and stuff like that, but I'll make an exception for this movie because that fucking suit looks so good. Yeah. And they show it in lots of different contexts. He's walking around on land, he's swimming around in the water. They show him being still, they show him really close up.
The first time they show it, a hand comes up out of the water and grabs some rocks, and you go, "Damn, that hand looks good." It's got webbed fingers on it. It's
fantastic.
It looked like the real aquatic monster hand, and so I'm glad that they showed it as much as they did and got the kind of shots that they got. They're real action shots, especially the underwater shots. It looks great.
Those are amazing.
They look great. I mean, he's swimming in that suit.
And hold his breath.
And it looks like something real. I mean, it was creepy when I was a kid. I would see it on television man, that's fucking creepy looking, that thing.
I even like the shots of him where they just show him and he's under the water, looking up at the boat, from in the weeds or whatever. That's it's really creepy looking.
Goggle fish-eyed looking things. And it's look like real glass eyes in it. So I guess you could see through them.
Yeah, he could see. Well, mostly. Yeah. He said he could mostly see in front. He didn't really have any peripheral vision.
The only thing before Alien 1 that came out that could rival that costume was be like the Slee Stacks from Land of the Lost.
Yeah.
Everything else fucking sucked. And I went back and looked at the Slee Stacks, and for the time for television, they looked okay.
I mean, for as low budget as that TV show was, they were actually way better than they had any right to be.
Yeah, pretty good. Especially the Enoch one, the one that could talk, the brown one.
Yeah.
He looks better. So, Creature from Black Lagoon and the Slee Stacks, that'd be about it.
Can we talk about, let's talk a little bit about this, because I feel like maybe a lot of people don't know this little bit of horror trivia. So, the head of the Gill-man costume was designed by a woman named Millicent Patrick. Now, she was one of the first female Disney animators. She worked on Fantasia. She worked on like a bunch of stuff. And actually, she went on and worked on a bunch of 50s sci-fi. I mean, she did like some of the Masks and the Mole People, and she worked on the Metaluna guy from like This Island Earth, all this kind of stuff. So she did the head for the creature from the. So she sculpted it. She did like the design and everything like that. Now, when the movie was first coming out, because she was like very young and very pretty, they made her part of the marketing materials, like, you know, Beauty Made the Beast, all this other kind of stuff. And she went on a tour, right? Like with her drawings of the head and everything. So she was doing that. And then behind her back, Universal Studios and the makeup artist who was also working on the Gill-man suit, whose name I know, but I'm not going to say it because he's an asshole. But he basically went to Universal and cried because he didn't want her to get the credit for designing the head, even though she did. So Universal said, okay. So they changed all the marketing to Beauty Lives with the Beast rather than Beauty Made the Beast, which is what it was originally. And they basically took her name off the shit. And then when she got back to LA after the tour, they fired her.
Damn.
At his insistence, because he was so butthurt that she had done the head and he wanted the credit for it. And he took credit for it for a long time. I don't think they actually figured out that she had actually made it until the 2000s or later. So I was like, wow.
So she never got another job.
What a shitty dude. Yeah, like after that, she basically went back into like acting and like minor acting and modeling. She didn't work again. Like I said, she did do some minor stuff on Mole People, but I think Mole People was before this, now that I'm thinking about it. But at least she's getting credit now. But it's like, I was like, wow, that was like really, really shitty. That was really shitty that dude did that. But yeah, everybody knows now, but you know, it's a little too late to help her any. But yeah, there's that. Because like I said, the Gill-man costume is like fucking iconic, and it's easily the best monster of the 50s.
I wonder if it's still around.
I don't know. Somebody's got to have that. I mean, I wouldn't think that they would have gotten rid of. And I don't know if they had more than one. I think they just had
several of them.
I mean, you would think that they would have several. That's what they would usually do.
Just in case something goes wrong.
In case something goes wrong. And I'm not really sure, because it was two guys playing it, I'm not really sure if they were both wearing the same suit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because maybe they had to have adjustments. Maybe one's like slightly different size or something like that. Also, another thing I didn't know about Creature from the Black Lagoon was that it was originally shot to be shown in 3D. But
that makes sense why some of the stuff is coming straight at you.
Right. Yeah. It's like I didn't really notice it that much when I was watching it, but then when I looked it up, I was like, oh yeah, like I remembered some kind of stuff. The thing about it though is like they were thinking about because I think a year prior they had done I think it was House of Wax maybe, and that was like 3D, and that was kind of a big hit. So they were like, oh, well, we need to do a 3D one too. But then by the time it was coming out, 3D was kind of fizzling out a little bit, and so really only the really big city theaters got the 3D. Like pretty much everybody else in the country saw it in 2D. And honestly, like for a long time, even when they tried to like release it, because I think it had the gray filter like they do 3D nowadays. It didn't have like the black and blue thing, or not black and blue, but red and blue.
Yeah, well, it wasn't color.
Right, yeah, so, but for a long time, like, they tried to release different versions of it in 3D, but it's like they could never get it to line up right, and it was all this other kind of shit. So I don't know, like, maybe you can get it now, like, where you can watch it the way it's supposed to be watched, but as far as I know, you can't. Like, every version I've ever seen is flat, so I didn't even realize that it was supposed to have been filmed in 3D.
I don't think it'd make a big difference.
I don't think it would. I mean, but from what I heard, like, at least from people that saw it back then in 3D, because it did show in some theaters, they said it looked amazing, like, in 3D. But, you know, I don't know. So, because not that many people got to see it, apparently. But, yeah, so there
are certain things that don't hold up about the movie. It's got a lot of dialogue in it that is, if you ask me, filler. But that's common 50s, for the 50s.
Pretty much all 50s monster movies are like that.
Yeah, they're just trying to pad the movie out to get some more time out of it, and they spend a lot of time explaining things to you that you should know, or things that aren't really all that relevant. Like they even get into some subjects like, well, this will teach us how animals evolve, so we can learn to evolve ourselves on other planets when we colonize other planets. That's kind of far thinking. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
I was like, yeah, genetically engineering human beings so they can live on Mars.
Yeah, they were talking about that shit in the 50s.
That kind of stuff. So, but here's the deal. That's totally irrelevant to this. But they talked about it. They used that as filler. So at least a lot of the padding and the filler is kind of interesting. You know, it would have been that would have been real interesting in the 50s.
Well, and they were trying to give it like a realistic and also
right.
like a sci-fi context.
Right.
Just like, ooh, man, that's like, think about that. You know
Right,
what I'm
yeah.
saying? That's why we want to study this monster like so
right.
much.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
Had it been made later, they just would have edited all that out and it would have been straight action through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Probably would have held up a little bit better. But it was just the limitations and the tastes of the time. You know, that's what the audience expected. And I think watching these movies, I have a feeling that the audience really didn't pay too close of attention to the dialogue anyway. I think they were sitting in the theater eating popcorn, fucking yelling.
Probably
little kids yelling and shit.
They were just waiting for the monster.
Waiting for the monster to show. Yeah, and clapping on the monster. They probably didn't really know the story because they're actually entertaining if you just watch them like that too. So I kind of think a lot of the dialogue goes in one ear and out the other. I think.
I mean, honestly, as long as you got the and there is a lot of the monster in this. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the monster is in that, and also, you know, you get Julia Adams in that swimsuit, so I'm sure that was really.
Yeah, they make sure you see that she's well built. You know.
Although the swimming scenes were not her, that was a body double.
Okay, she's well built, good looking woman. How old was she? 21? Maybe 22?
I don't know actually. Yeah, I think she was just in her 20s.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can see how the Gill-man would be like, ooh,
Yeah.
yowza. You know what I'm saying?
She had nice legs.
She did, yeah. Although, like I said, in the swimming scenes, that wasn't her. That was somebody else. But she, I mean, they show her in the bathing suit. Yeah, she's walking around on the boat and stuff. So it's not like it's all body double. Just the swimming is the body double. Also, this is a fun fact, too. Like, all the underwater stuff was actually filmed right here in Florida. In Wakulla Springs, actually, which is only about 4 hours from here. I feel like
I think it's supposed to be the
hours.
Amazon.
It is supposed to be the Amazon, but you know, they're not going to go to the fucking Amazon in the 50s and film.
You wouldn't want to go there now and film.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It would probably be like too
bugs
dangerous.
that fucking eat
That's what
you
I mean.
up,
It's too dangerous. It's just too
weather.
expensive. It's too much trouble. Most of it, I mean, they filmed a lot of it on Universal's backlot, like they did with most of the stuff. But you know, I think almost all of it, like the outside shots, other than the underwater stuff, was filmed in California. But like the underwater stuff was filmed in Florida in Wakulla Springs. So you know, there's that too. And actually, I didn't know that was where they shot it, but that's where they shot it. But yeah, I think, like I said, I kind of feel like, you know, like a lot of 50s films, it does have that kind of, you know, white dudes standing around talking about stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of 50s movies had that.
Yeah.
And at least
we're not being racist. We're white people. It's
no, I'm just saying. Well, no, I mean they are. They're not really any. And honestly, at least this does have like some more interesting. Like it has the hot girl, and it also has like the funny boat captain.
Yeah.
Who, like I said, who's also in the sequel. I don't know if he's in the third one, but I know for sure he's in the sequel.
They're just very generic archetypes. They're kinda,
right.
They're kind of conformist in the way that where they're very predictable. You know what kind of characters are going to be in these movies. Every one of these movies has the same assortment of characters. The scientist dude, the fucking the leading man jock, basically.
Yeah.
The tough guy from the Bronx or something. You know what I mean? The Southern guy.
Yeah. Very archetypical.
Yeah, it's all archetype. Then you got like the Mexican guy who's almost usually comedic relief.
Sadly, yeah.
Yeah. What do you say, senor? You know, that kind of stuff. You know, you hamming it up and shit. The big strong black guy, that's always in there. A lot of times it's in there.
Yeah, not this one.
Not this one.
This one, well, yeah, I mean, they do have two, like, guys who are supposed to be, like, you know, Amazonian, like, guides or whatever at the beginning. And they're not really played as comic relief, although they're just basically monster fodder because they're the first ones that get eaten by the monster, you know, which is kind of shitty, but, you know.
It's just the way they wrote those movies, and it was just the way they were trying to play to certain demographics of the time. And the audience was very different. Who was going to see these movies? And you wanted them to play nationwide, so you had to have like at least one person from every fucking region. They all kind of had to be understandable to everybody, no matter what region you lived in. So it was basically transatlantic and fake Southern accents. They're just real predictable. You guys know 50s movies if you're watching.
Yeah.
It's the way they were.
But that's the thing.
Generic.
I
very
kind of feel like,
generic.
other than, that which, like I said, is admittedly a very minor criticism, because this movie is not long, so it's not like it drags or anything like that. But really, the star of the show here, obviously, is the monster. The suit looks great. They show a lot of the monster.
The monster and the girl.
And the monster is like the hero. But he's not the hero because he kills a lot of people. But he's kind of like a misunderstood. Like, you don't blame him for killing the people, because, like, get the fuck out of my house. It's like all these people came in and started fucking up. Like I said, they poisoned the water, like, at one point, trying to get him, like, I don't know if all the fish died or if they just
shooting
stunned
him
them.
is the first thing they did. Didn't they shoot him? Isn't that the first thing that happens to him, pretty much?
Probably. I was like, yeah, that sounds about
I
right.
think he was up on the deck of the boat, and they shot him.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Yeah, so the monster's like, dude, I'm just...
I think he was just standing on a boat.
Like I said...
He was looking at the girl standing on a boat. I think they shot him. I think that's the first thing that happened.
Because, I mean, the thing about it was, like, the Black Lagoon...
Or did he jump up and kill somebody who was up on the... I don't remember. There was I think he killed some guys up on the bank.
They did, but he was, he came up and he killed the two guides.
The two guides, right.
Right.
But he might have had a prior beef with them. We don't know.
Right, we don't know. That was, like, the first thing. And they were invading, like I said, he doesn't know. He's an animal.
Yeah.
So it's like, all he sees is, like, who the fuck are these motherfuckers camping out on my shit?
Yeah.
It's like, normally, nobody's here.
Yeah.
So this is another thing where, like, in King Kong, this is kind of like man's hubris, I guess. Yeah. Like, you're wandering into this place where previously the monster had lived just minding his own business, and then you blundered in there, like, trying to capture him and shit like that. Of course he's gonna fight back. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, it's not his fault he fell in love with that girl. She looked hot in that swimsuit, and he's lonely. There's not another lady monster around anywhere, it looked like. So, you can't really blame the guy. But I'm just saying, so, like, at the end, it looks like he dies at the end, but they do kind of, like, leave it ambiguous, because, like I said, spoiler alert, there is a sequel. There's actually two sequels. Revenge of the Creature, which I've seen multiple times because it was on Mystery Science Theater. It's not bad. The suit in that looks better. Nestor Paiva, the guy that plays the boat captain, he returns. But it's like a new story. The third one, I've seen stills from it, or like clips from it, and it looks not that great, and I don't think they used the same suit, because the suit looks significantly shittier. Yeah. So I think if it was the right thing that I was looking at. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see it, just to see what it's like. But but honestly, like, the first one is the best one, but the second one's okay too if you want to go that route. Although the MST episode is, like, a lot funnier. Probably than just watching it by itself. But yeah, I kind of feel like the monster is the main reason to watch this, and those unbelievable, like, underwater shots. Like, all the underwater shots are amazing. The underwater fight scenes, the underwater action scenes, like, you don't even see shit that good, like, nowadays sometimes.
You definitely didn't see anything that good in the 80s.
No way.
Underwater shots. Nope.
I mean, that legit looked like a dude and a monster, like, fighting underwater, and it's just, like, it was really well done.
Yeah.
Really well done. So, yeah.
Those are the best parts of the movie.
They are, yeah. I think that's, like, definitely the highlights.
When he's on land and he's in his lair, nah, I don't buy it as much. And it's because the way they instructed that actor, he's just walking around in a suit, kind of lumbering around. That suit looked pretty flexible. I'd have had a guy who was real good at dance or ballet or, like, mimery.
Yeah.
And have him walk like an animal. I mean, like in Predator 1, the guy who played the Predator was a big old tall dancer.
Was a dancer, yeah.
And he made that movie, he made that character believable, the way he's walking and jumping. And, you know what I mean? You have to know how to use your body to become that creature. And to me, the guy was just kind of like a shambling kind of a...
Yeah, and like I said, it was a different dude. He looked a lot more natural underwater. But like I said, that was
underwater. He looked great.
That was a different dude. That was like that played him, like, on land. Right. Played him underwater, and the dude that was underwater was, like, kind of like an underwater. Yeah, they needed a dude like a diver.
They needed a dude like the dude that played the Predator, running around in that thing, and you get to see him. He does a cameo at the very end. He's the helicopter pilot, the black guy at the very end when the shit's blowing up. They come to save Arnold.
Yeah,
that's the guy who played.
He
the Predator.
Died young, didn't he?
Died young.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Died of AIDS from a blood transfusion.
Yeah, he was a big tall guy. He had cancer. But yeah, that's the thing. Well, and that's why the guy and shit, I can't remember what his name is right now, but the guy that played the fish man in the Guillermo del Toro movie Shape of Water. He played, the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth. Like, anytime he played Abe Sapien in Hellboy. Like, anytime you need, like, a creature, it's that guy. And it's kind of the same kind of thing. I don't think that guy's a dancer, but he's, like, he's very, very slim, and he's, like, very good at, like, physicality, like, doing physical... That makes him look... like a monster, or make him look like inhuman in a lot of ways, because
become a character.
You do, and that's the thing. And I kind of feel like, the underwater scenes with the Gill-man, like that definitely looks like a real creature that could exist, like the way he's moving around, because it's very natural. Whereas, like you said, on land, it's still good. Like on land, it's still, the suit looks good and everything like that. But it's
definitely a man.
It does suffer a little bit from that kind of like man in a monster suit thing, but not as bad as like some other.
He needs to be hunched
ones.
over. He needs to have more of a hop walk, almost like a bipedal frog or something, some kind of an amphibian kind of a looking thing, something that can jump from rock to rock and sit the right way.
Yeah, maybe it would have been better to make him not bipedal, but then he couldn't carry the girl around, which was a big part of the marketing.
Throw it over his shoulder, though.
Yeah, like it might have been cooler if he was more like alligator.
Yeah,
like that maybe
should have shown him climbing up rocks and sitting up on top of fucking things, and jumping off and sitting funny, sitting like a frog or something. Like a gargoyle.
Yeah, that'd have been cool.
Yeah.
That'd have been cool. Although I will argue, like I said, I think the suit still looks amazing.
Yeah.
Like on land, it still looks good. It looks good in every... Because I was, like, really looking at it, like, while we were watching the movie, and I was like, man, that suit's fucking incredible. It's, like, the attention to detail.
The reason why it wasn't really making sense to me, underneath the water, it looked very smooth and fluid. It looked natural, but when he was walking on land, it's just a man in a suit. I'd have had him. He should have been real fast and agile, and going around rocks and climbing and jumping, and they could have done that. If they could shoot those underwater shots, they could have shot stuff above ground and edited it right, kind of like he did with the Predator. Just have him more amphibian, and you just needed the right guy to become that creature on land, some kind of a acrobat or some kind of a dancer. Probably that was just some dude in a suit.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? Like I said, I think it was a stuntman. I think it was a stuntman.
Yeah, wrong guy. He needed a dancer.
But yeah.
Or a mime.
Like I said, I don't really know if they thought about that too much back then, because they were just like, well, we're just making a monster movie.
Just a monster movie.
They didn't know that, like, 50 years later, like, people were going to be talking about it still. You know what I mean? Like, this many years later, we're still, how, like, influential it was. So, they didn't really think about it. They thought of it more throwaway, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really blame the stuntman, because shit, it was his direction. That's probably what the director told him to do. He probably could have done, better under a different direction too.
That's
just he's just doing what he was told to do.
Yeah, like I said, they just probably
it's too much like Frankenstein.
You have to think too that like in the 1950s they still weren't taking horror and sci-fi all that seriously, so it was just kind of like, hey, it's just a monster movie like for the kids, you know what I mean?
Right.
But but they did, like, to be fair, they did spend like a really lot of time making the suit look amazing and doing those underwater shots. So they did care a little bit, obviously. I'm just saying that maybe it just didn't go like that dots. Extra mile.
Yeah, they haven't connected the dots yet. You know what I mean? That you have to become this creature all the time. And it has to... The edit had to be... It looked too slow. Too much like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But underneath the water, it's fast and agile. And it had to be fast and agile on land. And they didn't ask him to do that.
Yeah. Oh well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, it should have been using terrain and hiding in the bushes and jumping. And that's just a totally different route than what they did. They just had it out in the open, shambling, walking towards the water,
climbing up on a boat. They climbed up on a boat. Well, he was trying to get the girl,
Yeah,
he's just like, I'll just be taking this boot.
Yeah. If you look, animals don't just fucking do what that thing did. You know what I mean? They use terrain and they run over things and jump, and they should have had it do that. They could have done it.
Although I do think they were trying to imply that he was partly human, too. Because, like I said, he was smart enough to know how to climb onto the boat. He was smart enough to know how to block the lagoon to keep them from getting out. Because he understood that they would bring more people.
Well,
if they left.
I'm going to come back at you with something. The humans had technology and firearms. You have to have an advantage for the monster to give him a chance. And typically, in a good creature feature monster movie now, modern one. It's his physicality,
Right.
speed. It can camouflage, that kind of stuff, you know. And they could have done it. They just could have edited it a different way. Should have done it kind of like Predator, where you see hints of the motion. You don't see him covering a lot of distance. It's in flashes.
Yeah.
And you chop it up to make it look like, damn, you know, he went fast.
Right.
You know, because it's only like 2 or 3 seconds, and then you show it in slow motion to make you think it's happening fast. See, that's how I do things sometimes. I go real slow, all right, and it fools everybody into thinking that I did it fast. See, didn't know about that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I gotta get out of here. See how fast I was. See how fast.
Okay, Tom.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, what do you guys think about Creature from the Black Lagoon? Probably the last of the iconic Universal monster movies, and the one that, you know, introduced a new one that hadn't existed before. So that was like kind of neat. But yeah, so it's on Tubi at the moment if you want to watch it for free. Also, let me know if you've seen the third one and if it's worth watching, because I've seen the second one and that one's okay, but it's like, I don't know if I should waste time watching the third one or not, because I don't really hear anything about it. So if you've seen it, like, let me know if it's worth watching, and I'll look into it. All right, so that'll do it for this movie retrospective. We'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.